Hi Ken, so you're very welcome to virtual Féile this year, and I'm delighted to welcome me here in RSC Connolly, the James Connolly Centre, and you via Zoom. So you're very welcome.
Well, thanks very much. I've really good memories of being there in person a couple of years ago, and it was a really good event, and I remember the warmth of the welcome still. So very nice to see you.
Thank you very much, and hopefully you'll feel it virtually this year as well, through the new medium that we've all become accustomed to with COVID in these strange times. So, Ken, you're obviously most well known, certainly in my experience, as being a filmmaker, and making incredible films of a wide range of topics. When did that interest in filmmaking begin? Was it something that started quite young, or was it something that developed later?
No, it developed later. When I was young, I was stage struck. I wanted to work in the theatre and spent my pocket money going to see plays. And then after being a student, I managed to get a job at the BBC, directing television. And we found that the form of television drama was didn't fit what we wanted to do. I was working with a group, a very progressive group, and we wanted to make fiction that was contemporary, that was from the streets, not from a television studio. But the process of making TV drama was very theatrical. They were like theatre sets set around a studio and big electronic cameras filming the action. And that didn't fit what we wanted to do. So it was the time of the French New Wave, and we became very interested in cinema and in the handheld camera, 16mm films. And we managed to make films at the BBC while it was trying to keep its grip on TV drama as theatre, and that led then to cinema. So it came out of a dissatisfaction with TV drama, to be honest.
That's excellent. It's nice to see when you don't have something there that's available. It's incredible to see you going and creating it yourself. And I suppose in that same vein, in terms of your politics, which would be, as we would know, quite left leaning. Where did that come out of? Was it something again that began early in your family life, perhaps, or at school? And at what stage did it and your filmmaking become so intertwined?
No, my family wasn't political. My dad was from a family of a mining family, and he was one of 10 kids. But he wasn't political. If anything, he erred in the other direction, and the Daily Express came into our house, which was a pretty malign influence at the time. But I wasn't political. A little bit when you become a student. I mean, all students tend to be iconoclastic. You want to change things, but I wasn't political precisely. No, it happened when working with this group in television. A group of people my age, we were in our 20s, late 20s. I joined the Labour Party. I helped, I'd worked for Harold Wilson just as a Labour Party member. And then the New Left emerged in the mid-60s, which was neither Washington nor Moscow. And it was an anti-Stalinist left. And the people I was with were very engaged. So I became engaged, and I worked with writers who really introduced me to a whole other a set of ideas that I really hadn't considered before. A writer called Jim Allen, whose family came from the Bog of Allen. He very proudly would tell everyone. Jim Allen, a great working class writer, socialist, activist. And through him, I learned politics, and through the others, Tony Garner, the producer, Roger Smith, story editor, we became involved in left groups, read more books than I'd ever read at university, read the classic socialist texts and absorbed the ideas. It was the time in '68, of course, was a big high point of that new left, with the factory occupations, the events in Paris. And so we were very engaged politically and absorbed the basic principles of socialism, the basic principles of class struggle, the philosophical ideas, the political ideas, the historical ideas, and that core, I think, of analysis has stayed with me ever since, because the ideas have been shown to be true. You know, not least by Margaret Thatcher, you know, the most right-wing prime minister we've had, really. But she, in a sense, was an inverted Marxist. You know, she knew that capitalism would survive if the working class could be made to pay the price, as indeed that was the base of our politics. So I think the ideas are sound. The tactics have often been mistaken, but the basic analysis is sound.
It's incredible. It was a time of great change. I studied history myself, and that sort of 60s into late 60s period is iconic, especially for young people coming to the fore and really implementing their ideas. And I suppose in that sense, it was a new approach. And that ties in also from what I've read of your own approach to filmmaking. If you're approaching a new project, Ken, what's the process behind that? You know, what steps do you take as you sort of get your teeth stuck into a new project?
Well, I've always worked with a writer, and it's always been a partnership, and with a producer as well. And when we decide to, you know, try to explore an idea or explore a story, that's always a collective decision of the three of us. And I've worked with Paul Laverty and Rebecca O'Brien now for 30 years nearly. And Paul and I talk every day. I mean, he's through on the phone or emails or whatever. We share stories from the newspapers, share everything from football to films to the attacks by the right wing or whatever's going on, you know. And out of that, an idea will emerge, a theme will emerge, or maybe a story that has just grabbed both of us. But the essential quality it has to have is that it needs to be a simple narrative that illustrates a much greater truth or a greater set of ideas. And the films that work best have a group of characters where there's an unresolved conflict or a knot or a tension or conflict that has to be unraveled. And it's how that is unraveled. And the simple events of the narrative should explore that, so that you're telling a story, but in the telling of it, simply by showing what happens to those characters, you reveal the essential core that is conflict that is in society. It isn't just limited to those characters. It's a light onto the world we live in, if it works, you know. And then we talk about the characters, and Paul will write them down, and we'll talk about maybe a plot outline, and then Paul writes a first draft, and that's the document that really becomes the base of the film, and we knock it backwards and forwards, and it's full of changes and you know, amendments, but the writing is Paul's.
It's an incredible process, and you know, I think sometimes people think that writers or filmmakers just sit down and pour everything out, and I'm sure some of them do, but that whole thought process behind it's incredible, and you certainly see it come through in the stories in many of your films. One of the other things, and I'll explain the background of it for anyone who is unfamiliar, as I understand it, you have a perhaps unconventional approach when it comes to your actors and actresses in the film, whereby you give them some free rein. For example, you explain what way the scene will generally play out and allow them to take some lead on the core conversation, the actual words. What inspired that, or has that always been your way, or how did that come about?
Well, you learn from your mistakes, really. When I began in television, I was doing a police series called Z-Cars, and that was you got 3 weeks basically to do it. The cast was the cast of the series, and you had to find the other parts. And so you would find the cast. You would have 10 days to rehearse, and you would begin with a read through. So we would read it through, and the performances were usually quite good at the read through. You know, that's why they'd been cast. And then I would work with them for 10 days, and they gradually deteriorated. And then we get to the studio, and I think, this is dreadful. What have I done? What have I said? So I began to think that there's got to be a better way of doing this, because it has lost its spontaneity. And the point of films is you can see, you get a sense of what has been worked out and predetermined, and you get a sense of what is spontaneous. You know, I've said before, film acting should be like a pianist who plays a piece of music. That it should be that he or she sits at the piano and just plays, and you think, wow, that's just been created at that moment. But if it's laborious, if it's been obviously rehearsed, if there's no spark of life or spontaneity, then it loses something. So I began the first way we really tried this was when we did a film called Kes. And we didn't give the script to the actors at the beginning. We rehearsed everything that would have happened before the film starts. And then they get the script in pieces, so that if they know everything about the character and the situation, but they don't know what's going to happen. So when there's a surprise, you film a surprise. When there's and when a conversation takes an unexpected turn, they have to respond in that moment. And the balance is balancing that sense of spontaneity with Paul's or the writer's dialogue, because actually what you see in the film is 95% what Paul's written, and yet the actors feel, well, we made that up, but of course they didn't, because they absorbed the lines, and then hearing it for the first time from the other people in the scene produces a sense, or ideally produces a sense of, wow, this is just happening for the very first time. And if you cock it up, you know, if you make a mess of it, well, you just do it again, because it's just film going through a camera. It's not like the theatre. You can make mistakes, and the freedom for the actors to make mistakes is essential, I think, to them feeling free just to live the moment. And it also keeps everyone on their toes, you know. I mean, no one knows what's going to happen to them. So there's a sense of excitement, a sense of, I mean, sometimes when we've done, I think it's happened in The Wind That Shakes the Barley, and certainly in Land of Freedom, a film about the Spanish Civil War. Some of them got shorter contracts than others, so they knew they were either going to get killed in battle or deserts. So it means there's a kind of excitement on the set, rather than a predetermined knowledge of everything's going to happen. It's marrying a sense of spontaneity, a sense of this is happening just in that moment, that you can see in people's eyes, the struggle to be articulate, the struggle to find words, and also being absolutely faithful to Paul's writing, which is very precise, which he works on to the word, to the letter, and which, you know, absolutely that's my responsibility to make certain that is on the screen almost exactly as Paul's written it. And if it works, the audience should feel they've just made that happen in a moment. It's just happened, but it isn't.
You certainly get that raw emotion, I suppose, that response that somebody is just working off somebody in the film. And you mentioned Land and Freedom and the Wind That Shakes the Barley in particular, and I'll certainly refer to those later on. But you get that raw emotion and that human response, I suppose, to what's happening in the scene, which makes for incredible viewing anyway from a viewer's perspective. You mentioned Kez and some of your earlier films as well, which often touch on topics that can be somewhat uncomfortable, particularly for people who, in the 60s, for example, you were saying, where it was quite a regimented and a set way of doing things. You certainly broke that mold, Ken, when you approached some of your films and topics such as homelessness with Kathy Come Home, and Hidden Agenda, which looked at collusion here in Belfast and in the north. The Navigators, and even more recently, I, Daniel Blake. People, to me, it's people being uncomfortable with topics that are actually very topical even now, as they were in the 60s. What are your thoughts on people who react, I suppose, maybe not negatively, but who show their discomfort with those sorts of topics?
Well, it comes from a political hostility always. I mean, people hide their disagreement in sometimes in ways that don't confront the basic ideas. And we've got a lot of us. Well, I mean, many of the films have had real hostility. I mean, to take since we're in Belfast, to take the Wind That Shakes the Barley, which was a story of the Irish War of Independence, followed by the Civil War, and of course there was a lot of hostility from the British establishment to that. I mean, we were called worse propagandists than Leni Riefenstahl, who was Hitler's propagandist, and Michael Gove, who was, I think, Minister of Education, or went on to be Minister of Education, said that the film was anti-British because it didn't show that the Republicans had always denied the democratic roots. Well, of course, I mean, he'd forgotten the election. When was it, 1919, when the mass of the Irish people voted for independence, and the British sent in the troops and dissolved the parliament and shut down the press. I mean, what an ignorant, stupid man he is, now in the government. What a pity for us. So we've got huge hostility, but of course nobody actually challenges the basic facts. Nobody challenges it. Yeah. The same thing with Daniel Blake, which you mentioned, which was about the effects of a cruel benefit system, which is turned into an obstacle course for people who need help. And the architect of that appalling scheme, Ian Duncan Smith, I think he said it was a fiction. The film was a fiction. Well, I mean, they know the truth. They know the reality. So they don't confront the reality. They don't confront the facts. They don't confront the ideas. They try to subvert it by a kind of irrelevant attack. And it's a mark of their lack of integrity, really. Because you can deal with an argument where they say, well, that's your premise for this, and I challenge the premise on these grounds, and then you answer that. But they don't do that. They don't.
It's always interesting to see the responses, and of course, while there are always the criticisms, you get the praise and the realization that these stories are symbolic of reality in a lot of ways, and of things that actually happen, and that's always I suppose a credit to you, and to your co-workers, that you are putting together these stories that reflect a certain a story of people, day-to-day people, as well as your films, Ken. You've caused a few discussions over the years with other decisions. For example, your decision to turn down an OBE, and also you boycotted the Turin Film Festival on on the basis, and we talked about it on the premise of things, on the premise of the workers who had been, I suppose, put out of work when everything was outsourced. Were those difficult decisions to make? You know, you must have some concept that people were always going to react in a certain way. Did they have any sort of lasting impacts? Were they difficult decisions to make, or did you simply feel that was the thing to do?
No, they were very. I mean, those decisions were very easy, really, because I couldn't look you in the eye. If you accept an honour in the name of the British Empire, with what we know the British ruling class did in establishing their empire, you know, if you accept an honour in the name of slavery, dear God, what kind of self-respect can you have? So no, it was very easy. I mean, I was much younger. It was back in the late 70s, you know, the Labour government at the time. I mean, I think probably, you know, very well intentioned and nice way, you know, suggested this OBE, but I wrote a terribly pompous letter back, you know, saying, I mean, I'm embarrassed by it. I'm thinking about it now, but terribly pompous, self-righteous letter. But anyway, that was quite funny. But the Turin Film Festival and other festivals on other issues. I mean, the Turin one was the festival was organised by a film museum, which is a very famous film museum, but they were outsourcing the people who worked in the museum to a private company. And of course, as usual, the wages were going down, there were job insecurity, there were casual workers, and they wrote and said, please don't go. So I didn't go. I mean, it's dead easy, really. It's not, doesn't require any great, that's not a difficult decision, is it, really? You did the same, I'm sure.
Well, it's impressive, I suppose, to see that you have stood by those principles that you show in your filmmaking, and the premise that you create those films on, you stand by them in your own actions, which is always impressive, Ken, and doesn't always happen.
Well, you do your best. I mean, but the ridicule you'd get if you didn't, I mean, would be shocking. Unfortunately, I've got good friends. They just take the mickey forevermore. So.
As all good friends do, yeah. Yeah, and in terms of some of your films, then you mentioned a few, and The Wind That Shakes the Barley is up there, I think, top of my own favourite film list. But you've made some other incredible films about Ireland. Jimmy's Hall being one, which touches on Jimmy Gralton. Quite an unusual topic in that not many people would necessarily have heard of Jimmy Gralton. What sparked that sort of train of thought for you? Was it a specific event, or had you simply heard of him?
Yes, it was Paul Laverty's got a great friend, very principled friend in Ireland who passed on the stories of Paul, and Paul passed it on to me, and we just thought it's a great story, and it brings so many things together, you know, the censorship, the radical ideas that are put into practice that are hugely successful, which the ruling class determines to destroy, however absurd and however contradictory their actions are. But I mean, Jimmy Gralton, by establishing his dancehall and opening up ideas and challenging the accepted ideology of the state, were seen as dangerous. You know, a little dancehall in rural land. So the men of property, the men in political power, linked up to destroy him, despite the absurdity of transporting a man as an illegal alien who was born in Ireland. So Donald O'Kelly, great guy, lovely man, who told us the story of Jimmy Gralton.
Not at all. And you mentioned that he was in the film, and I know of friends who also were in Jimmy's Hall, and it's something that I think that you do fairly regularly, is that you try and sort of integrate the local community if you're doing a film somewhere. I'm aware also that you did it here in Belfast when you made Hidden Agenda. That's an incredible thing to do, to go out to the local community if you're making a film about that area or that place or those people. Have you always done that, or how have you found that as an addition to your process?
Well, yes, that again began with Kes. You know, back in 1968 we shot that, and it's the idea of a film crew coming like as a self-contained circus that occupies a space and has no connection to the people who live there. Just seems wrong, you know, because the people who are in the community where the film is set have so much to offer, apart from the fact it's good manners. Apart from anything else, it's a good manners, isn't it? But also they have so much to offer. I mean, they know the truth of what's going on. Why wouldn't you, ask for their cooperation? I mean, they become the film. It is their film, you know, and they, in the end, they are the best audience, because if they say it's okay, it's okay. It doesn't matter what the film critics say. If they say it's okay, they know the truth of it, you know, and they recognize that it's authentic, and they have the sharpest eye for inauthenticity, you know, for a voice that is pretending to be something it isn't. So it's absolutely essential. I mean, we rely on them, you know. It's their gift to the film. It's not us patronizing them. It's their gift to the film.
Yeah, and you certainly get that voice, and even small things like accents, and we've plenty of accents. If you go 2 or 3 miles up the road, from anywhere in Ireland, you have a slightly different twang, and just little things, as you say, the authenticity of the stories and of those who are telling the stories, and of their lives being reflected on the big screen. And it is something that you seem to specialize in, Ken, and you know, you cover those topics that mainstream media maybe tends to avoid sometimes. And is that a conscious decision, I suppose, that those films are always trying to, I suppose, show those inequalities? Is that something that you enjoy when you're making the film, or what way does that, you know, you avoid those mainstream topics and highlight another story that is very often not told?
Well, yes. I mean, I think if it was a story everyone was covering, you wouldn't want to tell it. You'd no need to. But of course they don't. I mean, that taps into the whole idea of how does the prevailing ideology become established, you know, and it becomes established through a kind of subtext that is common to the press, is common to the broadcasters, is common to people in a mass medium like cinema. You know, and in terms of cinema, I mean, you can see very clearly. I mean, because we see predominantly American cinema, and it's about there's a worship of wealth. There's the idea that the West is the home of freedom and democracy. That it's the establishment, the way things are is how they should remain. I mean, that's certainly true of the broadcasters. I mean, it's implicit in the BBC. You could write the BBC's worldview, you know, very simply, you know, belief in hierarchy, belief in the royal family, belief in established religion, belief that the free market equals freedom, you know, the democratic West, as opposed to the free world. You know, I mean, this is how our ideas are, or the established ideology permeates. So yes, telling stories that undermine that is absolutely essential. It's an absolute responsibility. I mean, art should be subversive. All art forms should be subversive. There's an old saying from I think it's from the Renaissance, test everything, hold fast that which is good. Well, they don't test everything. They don't test everything. They are the establishment. You know, their position is based on not testing everything. So it's you know, it's going back to that old idea. You know, you've got to dig up everything by its roots.
Yeah, no, it's excellent to have that that alternative view, that view that isn't the established media in your films, and you cover such a wide range of topics, as we mentioned before. On a slightly, I suppose, a lighter note, what in all your years of filmmaking, Ken, and you're at it quite a while now, what has been your favourite film to make, do you think, and why so? I'm asking the difficult questions now, Ken.
Well, you can't pick one of your own because they're like your kids. You know, you can't have a favourite, and you don't remember the finished film. You remember the process, and every group of people has their own, you know, people you enjoy meeting, and you know, people with great qualities. So you couldn't pick one over another, and some have turned out to be more successful, but that's more to do with my work, or the, you know, a kind of mistake we made early on. I mean, we've always found terrific people, lovely people. So I've been very lucky. Yeah.
Great. It's always about those around you too, you know, and that support system, which is incredibly important in any role, you know, that you have that support system. And in terms of you were saying there that you don't always know how a film is going to turn out. You don't always know, is it going to be successful commercially, or is it going to be a flop, or is it how it's going to be received? Were there any films that really, I suppose, surprised you with how well they went down with the general public that you maybe weren't expecting?
Well, you don't know really. I mean, every day you're in danger, you know, because I mean, every day you don't know, and filmmaking is the art of the possible. It depends on what you can achieve with this group of people, in this location, in this weather, with the things that go wrong, you know, things that don't turn up on time, or little things that, you know, suddenly you hear a track or somebody making a noise a street away, and they won't stop, and so you lose hours. So it's what's possible on that day. Will people respond in the way you hope they will? Will they not? You just don't know. I mean, nothing is guaranteed. When you wake up in the morning, you just don't know how it's going to turn out. And you live without a safety net, you know. So it's everything is it's a juggling act really, which is the excitement of it, but also, you know, nothing is predicted every day, and yes, that some have you don't know quite which ones are going to. I mean, Daniel Blake sort of hit a moment, you know, it was just a little film. There was just a few people in Newcastle turning up every 5 days a week for 6 weeks, and who knows? You don't know. It's a very small little local thing you're doing, and then amazingly it connected, and you work on other things, just as much work, and they connect to a few people, not a lot. I mean, Cathy Come Home we didn't know. I mean, you know, way back in 1966, I think it was. We didn't know, you know, whether it was going to have a big effect or a little effect.
It's those topics that are topical, I suppose, that really make a film strike a chord, I suppose, with the general public. And as you say, nothing's predictable. You don't know how people react or what will be topical at that moment. Can I just touch on something that you mentioned there? You said 6 weeks filming for 5 days a week for Daniel Blake. That, to my knowledge, is a relatively short space of time to film an entire film, is it not?
Yeah, well, not really. I mean, it's good to film quickly because you keep an energy going then. No, it was. I think it was. We were a bit less than 6 weeks. I think we were about 20. Can't remember. I think it was Daniel Blake was about 27 days or something. No, it's pretty quick. But it's to do with priorities, really. You see, I think film. If you can film quickly, everyone keeps their energy going. You're moving on all the time, and you have to keep the sense, the emotional level of the group. I mean, what you're filming is the actors. The people in the film are the priority when you're filming. So you want to find simple locations. You want to find them close together, because an awful lot of time is wasted traveling from place to place, or taking a whole circus with you. You know, filmmaking is very wasteful in terms. I mean, for most feature films, there's a whole circus of portable toilets, caravans for people, actors to sit in, endless kind of, huge, great trail of lorries and equipment, and we cut that right down. It's very simple, small crew, locations very close to each other. Don't work long hours if you can avoid it. Sometimes if you have a night shoot, then make certain you get it in before 12 o'clock, so you have a normal day the day after. Simple things like organizational things. Oddly enough, I mean, it's probably not obvious to people outside the business, but people in the business know filmmaking is organization. It's planning, it's organization, it's foreseeing what will go wrong. And of course, often things do go wrong. Yeah, things do go wrong, but you have to try and, think of all the things that can go wrong and have a plan, have a contingency fund, and be inexpensive. I mean, that's why we've been able to keep going. Is that we're a cheap gig, we're cheap dates, and it means that if the people who support us financially know that they will get their money back, unless it's terrible. If it's really terrible, of course they won't, but provided it's not too bad, they'll get their money back. And it means you can keep going.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, and for anyone looking on the outside who doesn't, and I have some knowledge of the film industry process, by no means an expert, simply by watching the odd documentary here or there, but you see those big processes and organizational things, and actors who have worked 70-hour weeks, and directors and producers who are working the same, and to hear that some of those films that have been equally as successful that you have made, that are made in a different way, just shows, I suppose, that there is an alternative. So Ken, I'll come back to Belfast a little bit. I'm here in the James Connolly Centre on the Falls Road, and I know you've been to Belfast before, but you haven't, I don't think, made it to the Connolly Centre yet. But you will someday, Ken.
I will.
But we obviously tell the life story of James Connolly, from his politics to his family life to the difficulties that he faced and how that shaped his thinking. How do you find Connolly's politics, or that politics, relevant nowadays, both to your filmmaking and to your life in general?
Well, I mean, I think the principles that guided Connolly are eternal, really, and particularly, I mean, as a trade union organizer, his identification of the cause. Well, the famous phrase, the cause of Ireland is the cause of Labour, and the cause of Labour is the cause of Ireland, or the other way around. And that's absolutely true. That we've, I mean, politics, the reason Jeremy Corbyn was, in the words of one commentator, the victim of a political assassination, was because he and John McDonnell put the interests of the working class first. Their interests in a home, in a secure job, in a good healthcare system, in proper investment in the future, and now in Southern Connolly wouldn't have been so aware of, but the ecological disaster we're facing. Just putting the interests of the people first. I mean, I think we would have benefited from Connolly's organisational ability and his clarity of principle, because I think that was missing sometimes. But I think, I mean, the principle principles Connolly embodied and fought for and gave his life for, anti-colonialism, the solidarity with the international working class. I mean, he was an internationalist as well as someone who fought the British occupation, and a Marxist. And I think those ideas are absolutely central. We don't know how to fight without that. I mean, that's our map and compass, you know, to guide through the all the different headlines and all the different issues that come up, often disguised, and to see behind what they're actually fighting, what they say they're fighting over, what they're actually fighting over. I think Connolly's principles, absolutely, we should study them along with other socialists, great socialists of the past, because that's our strength. Our strength is our ideas. Our strength is the truth of that analysis, and that's what. If we don't base ourselves on that, we can never win.
Well, Ken, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you very much for taking part. I would just like to obviously extend an invite for you to come to Belfast once the current crisis has passed and we're free to travel and to meet friends again, much more easily than we are now. And I thank you to you. You know, Féile as a festival, you know, is the embodiment of the arts and of community and of bringing people together. And I think your films, where they tell the stories of communities like ours and tell it and allow those communities to take part in telling those stories, they're a credit to you and to your team. But yes, thank you very much. And as I say, we'll hopefully see you in Belfast sometime soon.
Okay, nice to see you. All the best, and solidarity with all the friends in Belfast.